right, so back to this. Holy shit, this is a quad day, right? This is the fourth recording of the day. Probably the only time you're ever gonna see me do a quad because I already know I'm not going to be able to tomorrow. But just man, I'm invest. Funny enough, these might all just get taken down anyway, right? But I guess it just goes to show how invested I am in this, right? I'm really enjoying this, and I'm really like kind of invested in. I guess kind of the story this is telling. Like I'm more invested in this than the actual show, right? In following along with this, right? Yeah. I'm again. It's just sorry. There's a fly. It's distracting me. Hold on. All right, I'm not going to be able to deal with it. It's just moved around too much, but again, we're just that's how, and we should just load game already so that we could get to that. Imagine one time we do it and it says load unsuccessful. I would be livid. But again, at this point, we're just again, we need to get this intro cutscene. We didn't get an outro one last time, and we're again on diagnosis client 11. Or we should be on not diagnosis 11, it should be lab 11. So which is the actual therapy session. But yeah, I mean, and then I believe for Lane's diary, we're on 11. But I feel like for us, the big thing is these lab sessions, like the actual, therapy counseling sessions, and then, the diagnosis. So that's the big thing there, right? Those are the two that we've already watched all the movies, at least the ones that we can access. Again, Lane's diary will eventually keep up with. Again, the therapist Toko's diary, not really keeping up with, but again, just that's because we don't have access to as many. But again, we're just gonna keep on going along, right? And kind of piece this whole thing together pretty much, right? And then we got a relative timeline going, which is nice. So I'm curious, maybe we can't get any more cutscenes. I just find that very odd. That because again, we were waiting on the tail end and we just weren't able to get one for the last part. So maybe, we can't get any more. So who knows? But yeah, it's just damn, Yeah, really is something. So again, I'll wait till like 5 minutes, then I'll just move and then start it. Hmm. And then yeah, I also made a black screen video on this. So it's a quad plus black screen video. I made a black screen video after the second one. Again, I'm gonna not really try to talk about more like meta stuff. Like the commentary I do in this is gonna kind of be strictly related to like the game and kind of the story, not even necessarily going over it in relation to the show. Like I'm treating at this point the game as like almost a different thing. And that's for the better. Like I honestly like the direction that this game is headed in more than honestly the show, you know. But I guess I don't know. Maybe we don't have access to these secret like hidden cutscenes anymore. Who knows? But I guess we'll see. At 5 minutes, I'm gonna stop. So 5 minutes my time, not your time. Your time should probably be like 4:30 because I just started later than but again, so all right, it's coming up on all right, 5 minutes. So and we need psychiatry number 11, not is this number 11? Okay, diagnosis claim 14. So we need lab 11. Oh my god, we're gonna have to go all the way around. Rep. I've kind of got a better idea of how this works. So yeah, we need lab 11. Or did we already? Am I crazy? So that's lab 11, counseling 12. Did we not go over freaking this 12th analysis? Or is this analysis 11? Okay, yeah, no, this is worse. I was just confused for a sec. うん。
私が問題ってどういうふうに見えること変なものが見えること何にも振り込まない何かに触られてるって感じること精神病の病の症状どうしてそんなことがしているの誰がそんなこと言うの本で調べたのレインちゃん、勉強熱心なのはいいことよ。でも病気でもないのに、あれこれ自分で病気を想像してしまうのはとっても危険なことなの。ほら、病は気からって言うでしょそんな言葉知らない。そう。でも、とにかくそういう風にしてると、自分が病気だって信じ込んじゃうの。でも、知りたかったの。自分がどうなっているか。そうね。よくわかるわ。レインちゃんは正しいと思うの。でもこれは先生からのはい。レインちゃんが直したいって思うなら、変に考え込んで詮索したり、調べたりしないこと、お願いできる先生は教えてくれるもちろんよ。じゃあ今約束しよう。先生はレインちゃんにすべて教えます。隠し事は一切しません。嘘をついたら針千本もっとすごいことだっていいよ。頭でこじゅっちゃって。変な先生。でもね、本当に先生はレインちゃんの力になってあげたいの。
It's just fucking flies bothering me.
レインちゃんに妹が欲しかったな。じゃあ、先生はレインのお姉ちゃんレインちゃんもそう思ってくれると嬉しいな。ありがとう。でも、今日はとにかく取りしよう。レインちゃんも疲れたでしょ。でも、先生の言う通りにする。よし、その調子。なんちゃって。実は先生が疲れてたりしてね。レインは疲れる違う。他のお仕事が結構忙しいの。もうレインちゃんに会えるときが待ち遠しいくらいよ。よかった。それじゃあ、あんまり遅くなるとお母さんに失敗しちゃうから。さようなら、トウコ先生。さようなら、レインちゃん。レインでいいよ。だって、妹にちゃん付けするなんて変だよ。そっか。それじゃ、さようなら、レイン。さようなら。
I think this was one of the most similar to how the previous one I talked about. I think this was one of the most interesting one we've seen. One of the most interesting ones we've seen. For again, I'll go over like everything, but for multiple reasons, right? I think the first thing is obviously besides, the what would you call it? Lain just blatantly opening up and I guess talking about the issues that she has again, regarding her symptoms, right? Which is the first thing we saw. Also, the fact that it's revealed that she's actually kind of, self-diagnosed, or at least not self-diagnosed, because self-diagnosed kind of implies you don't like it'd be like if I say like, oh, I have schizophrenia because the voices in my head, tell me like it do whatever. It's like, oh, I'm just thinking, right? It's not like a uneducated self-diagnose. It's like she legit looked into what she thought and potentially would believe her problem was. She didn't even necessarily say she had it. She just mentioned that, oh, are these symptoms of schizophrenia? And that just caught a Toko off guard and by surprise that, Lain would know such a thing and would kind of not even necessarily that she knew it because Toko already knew Lain was smart, more so that the fact that a revelation that Lain was looking into it, right? And again, the big thing that again, because the conversation that ensues is Toko doesn't want Lain to really look into it, right? Um, again, partially because she brings up the point about okay, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You start to believe you have something and it'll manifest. But I think the more interesting part about that conversation was Lane asks if she would be if she Lane would herself wouldn't figure out, then Toko would figure out what's wrong with her and tell her, right? And that she'd be truthful and honest. But the big thing in Toko obviously said she would, but the big thing that we kind of realized and or talked about, right, was it seems like Toko really doesn't know what's wrong with Lane. I mean, for lack of a better term, I mean, I think the fact that she's like requesting cerebral spinal fluids like a very big reach and kind of shows like she doesn't really have any idea or clue. Like, really, it seems like she doesn't really know what's wrong with her, right? So that's kind of like, I guess, the behind the scenes thing going on. But then it's also interesting that again, I think it's interesting specifically that Toko mentioned that Lane was like the little sister she never had, which would kind of explain, along with her being kind of a young and green 27-year-old, why she would feel kind of attachment, or I guess more so, she would feel what's the term? I guess she would end up feeling a kind of a connection with Lane in a sense, something to where it's like she would feel particularly invested in Lane as a client as opposed to like anyone else, enough to where she's willing to kind of go out of her way for her specifically. We see that with her specifically requesting to work with Lane as a therapist rather than a psychiatrist. But again, which specifically since she said, if she displays any signs of mental illness, I'll take up my role as a psychiatrist. That makes it seem like she's kind of going against the current in terms of working as therapist. But along with the fact that she just being blatantly honest thinks that again, a normal life is only borderline possible for Lane at this point. So this was a very interesting one. This was a very interesting one. Again, I'm curious to see what the diagnosis on this one's going to be. So counselor recording 12, diagnosis client 12. This one's going to be very interesting.
付属病院での失敗がクライアントに影響を与えている。ゴールシャッハテストで検査されていたといいます。彼女のことをすでに伏せてしまっている。マインブレイクとまではいかないので、今日のセッション、彼女に続けてしまった。安易な病名予想による失敗は慎まなくてはいけない。改めて指摘させた。カウンセリングの意義と目的を彼女に説明し、必要の理解を与える。今後、彼女の中でカウンセリングに対する目的意識が芽生えてくれればよいと思う。
So again, with these counseling or the diagnosis, we're a few behind. I'm not going to try to catch back up. I'm still just going to go one by one because I feel like that, makes the most sense and we'll get the most out of it. Again, I think the interesting thing here is she actually did reveal about the Rorschach test, right? I guess it was kind of inevitable, but also again that she needs to be more discreet. But it's also something to where it's like I think more of the worry is that again Lane, right? Because we already saw that she was just it's something that kind of it's a potential danger as Lane already seemingly views this as something that she just needs to do, nothing that she's particularly invested in. I mean, she was able to open up. Eventually, she opened up to Toka, but again, the issue is if something like this happens again in the future, right? It's a betrayal of trust, and the big thing when it comes down to this stuff is trust. So it's like, you know, there's a potential lack of that, right? So is this 13? Yeah. So let's do this. So
こんにちは、レイン。あ、今日から本格的にレインちゃんの、レインが怖い夢を見ないようにいろいろ調べるからね。うん。でも、子供見ないのこういう時はあるけど、こういう何がわからない。面白いみたい。あんまり聞きたくないから気にしないようにしてる。うん。レインはその声が誰かわからないわからない。男の人だったり、女の人だったり。じゃあ、どこから聞こえてくるかします空。うん。空の花火電線。なんとなく。電線くらい。そう。レインは電線の中に電線とか電気が伝わるものそう。 発電所でできた電気を送る道よ。電気みたいな感じがするの？よくわからない。時々、電線じゃなくて、空から聞こえる気もする。でも、今は気にならない？大丈夫。だって怖くないもん。ただ、お母さんに話したら、誰にもそんなこと言っちゃいけないって言われた。うん、そうね。聞こえない人には変なこと言うとって言われるもんね。でもね、先生には言ってもいいよ。安心して、先生はレインのこと変だなんて思わないから。病気だから？レイン、違うわ。そうね。金縛りって知ってるよね。お化けが出て、体が動けなくなること？そう。レインはなったことある？何度もあった。怖かったでしょ？うん。なんでそうなるか知りたい？なんでなの？簡単に説明するとね、人間の体ってとても不思議で、寝ているときに頭が起きているときと体が起きているときとがあるの。わかる？なんとなく。それでいいわ。じゃあ、今レインはどうなっている？どっちも起きている。今先生は怖い話をして、レインは逃げ出したいくらい怖い目に遭いました。どうする？逃げると思う。でね、そんな時に体が眠っていて動けない。それが悲しい。つまりね、怖い夢を見て、逃げたいのに体が眠っているから動けなくなるの。
Jesus, that actually
そんなわかる？
that actually scared the fuck out of me. The bottle I put in my trash just shifted and like it made noise. Then holy shit, that actually scared the fuck out of me. That made me jump a bit, but again, I'm not sure if it picked up on the audio, but holy that actually scared me. But again, big thing with this, the big thing, this is huge. Again, the fact that she can hear voices from the power lines because obviously the power lines, they're a big part of the show, right? In the anime, you just see them, right? And you can see, you can hear the electricity going through them, right? And again, her talking about how she hears voices from, again, starting with the sky, but then saying they come from those power lines, right? That's huge because that's basically exactly what goes on in the show. So again, that's the first thing. And then the second thing, and what I find interesting is that, again, the therapist, again, Toko basically confirms that, basically confirms that Lain is weird, right? She pretty much says, oh, if you told our people, they would think you're weird, right? But, you've told your mother, you've told me, and we don't think you're weird, or whatever, something along those lines. But basically confirming that. And then also again, I think the whole sleep, paralysis conversation is interesting because it's like I assumed it would get related to that, but it never really did. And but it's also something to where her specifically saying if I said like something scary, right? It's kind of like again, we know the whole thing is that Toko needs to build trust with Lane so Lane can be more honest and transparent with her. Because at this point, our guests are seeing suspicious. Toko doesn't really know what's up with Lane, right? I mean, again, asking for cerebral spinal fluid seems like a big reach in terms of like if I'm your boss and I hear you as a fucking therapist asking for cerebral spinal fluid, I'm like, dude, you do you have any idea what you're doing, right? Like at least at a surface level, it's again, granted, again, we talked about how kind of Toko being kind of a young green naive like doctor, right? Also kind of viewing Lane as a little sister. That also plays a role or part into it. Again, with just the nature of Lane as well in general, but it's just interesting, right? And then did this one just show up out of nowhere? Hold on. I think that one literally just showed up out of nowhere, but it seems like, we're doing this stuff all in order now. So we need what? Psychiatry 13. I believe this is it. Yeah. Or diagnosis client 1. Wait, okay, never mind. 13. So also that shows that freaking Lane's the first client.
母親への警戒心があるよ。原作は彼女の現実である。その現実を否定した母親に対する不信感が現れかもしれない。現時点ではクライアントのミルクや視覚の異常による切迫。幻覚の未だに判断がつきづらい部分がある。 クライアントが体験した空中に映る美術、天井のシミが怪物に見えるといったパレードリア的なものより、さらに創作人物で対象なき知覚に対して、逆に対象を見出しているので、有益所見の作業をします。
Dude, again, asking for the cerebral spinal fluid. To me, that just sounds like a reach. You don't know what it is. But again, it's something. The interesting thing is, again, they're talking about the client's mother and the mother not necessarily, I guess, believing Lain, which obviously would kind of play a part because then she kind of questions that would lead her to kind of question herself, right? Because the big thing is figuring out whether the hallucinations are real or not, right? Again, the Toko assumes they are fake, but she's also the one asking for, the spinal fluid, right? But it's also interesting, the whole part regarding again Lane hearing voices from the electric wires or telephone wires, right? Or Jesus Christ, what do you call them? The telephone lines. So that'll kind of come up later at some point, but that's very interesting there and kind of how again the big thing being is what Lane's going through, whether or hearing, real or not. Again, right now it seems like Toko doesn't believe so, but it's like, the whole thing is, yeah, she's still asking for all that cerebral spinal fluid. So again, just gonna save just in case, somehow. Again, so that was number 13. So we need number 14. Yeah, 14. Damn, it's gonna be a hot minute before you get through all these, but oh, that's we haven't seen a picture like that. Like most of the pictures you get are just gibberish. Okay, but sleep paralysis, that's relatable.
レインと同じ経験をしている人は少ないかもしれない。だからといって病気であるとは言ってないわ。感受性が強い子供の頃って、特にいろんなことが起こって。でも、怖いし、いや、何がその夢？自分がいらないような気になる。自分がいらないものが、自分がいらないいらないから戻ってこいって言われてる気がする。戻る、どこ？私、よくわからないな。自分が自分に戻れっていうね。わからない。けど、私みたいな私が、私の体を触って、ちぎるみたい。痛い？痛くない。けど、怖い。それは寝てるとき？多分、夢じゃないときがあるよ。わからない。
Bitch, we missed an entire section of dialogue. This shit better be accurate. Imagine if these subtitles are just not accurate whatsoever.
いたら、どうして気がついたの？友達に声かけられて。いつの間にか、何かきっかけみたいなのがあった？怖くて、じっとしていたら治ったの。それじゃあ、どんな様子だったか説明してくれるかな？絵とか描ける？描けない。そっか。あ、もうこんな時間だわ。ごめんね、レイン。先生、今日出かけなくちゃいけないの。ごめんね。中途半端になっちゃって。
Bruh.
でも、今は見えないなら、とりあえずはいいわよね。多分、金縛りみたいなことだと思うから、来月まで先生も調べておきます。これは先生の宿題ね。レインの宿題は、日記をつけること。日記？自分が今日何？
Oh my god, is that where that starts?
別に先生に見せなくて。
Oh my god.
ね。先生もレインぐらいの頃、日記をつけてたんだ。いや、でも振り返って読むと結構面白いものだし、とって忘れっぽいからメモ代わりにでもつけとくといいわよ。それで治るの？あんまり関係ないかもしれないけど、少なくともプラスにはなるわ。来月詳しく説明する。もし嫌だったら構わない。そうね。 買ってきたの。ほら、結構可愛いでしょ。先週お買い物に行ったら見つけちゃって、レイにプレゼントしたいなって思って。ありがとう。でも無理しなくてもいいよ。買ってあげたんだから書きなさいなんて言わないから、レインが日記をつけたくなったらつけてくれればいいわ。さあ、もう行かないと。忘れ物はない？一緒に妹のとこまで行こっか。
I think I know what I said about the R2. I think this is arguably quite possibly one of the most interesting ones we've got. Well, I guess out of these now three, but even more than so than the R2. Again, big thing, massive thing. Again, she reveals kind of her other self, right? Again, kind of how like the last one revealed the whole power lines thing. This one reveals her other self, which is something we know again is a very definitive thing, within the show and the anime itself, right? She has this sort of doppelganger, right? That kind of, comes out on the wire, but makes its way and encroaches into her real life. So she's revealing that at least she has some like kind of semblance of that even now, right? Where she's has this kind of other self that she like recognizes, but is afraid of, but hasn't really, I guess, seen yet. So that's the first big thing. The second big thing is again, as we just saw the diary, right? So this is seemingly a session that so it looks like again, we shouldn't have done it in line. We should have just worked our way up because the big thing with that is the Lane diaries most likely started after this again, because we're trying to kind of build a timeline. Those must have started after this session. So again, that's the big thing there, right? And then so that's I guess now we know just for future, just work our way up normally, right? Should have done that with the movies. Honestly, might rewatch the movies. Those are like, interesting there, but again, there's that, right? And then along with that, I think, honestly, I think the therapist, what's her name, Toka or whatever, that's her name, right? I think she's kind of dropping the ball, between leaving in the middle of a session, and then I think a big thing being, again, kind of her dismissing, like, because this is kind of like the one big thing I feel like she could kind of latch onto and hold on to and grasp. Again, the fact that Lane kind of feels like there's like another version of her, another self, like, or just another, Lane, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like that'd be like the one I feel like relevant thing that she would actually have somewhat of a, that she could somewhat grasp onto. But again, and then also the fact that, again, like I said, she's dipping in the middle of a session, again, not really reaffirming that, saying it's just sleep paralysis or whatever, Again, it feels like she's kind of dropping the ball here, but also, again, it's like, and it's weird because, like, I feel like that'd be the one thing you could latch onto, but also it's like, again, with that, yeah, the main bigger thing there being that again, we'll see kind of her sort of analysis of it, right? But it's like, yeah, I mean, like it's kind of big, big lanes kind of opening up, right? And that's something to where it gives her more of an idea again, but still, the whole cerebral spinal fluid thing, right? How are you even gonna get cerebral spinal fluid from her? I don't know, but like again, it's definitely interesting. This was a big one. This was a big one. So 14, right? And again, so we actually see this is where you see the start of so that raises my question then, right? Are these Toko diaries? Then, because if this is all just chronological, that's what it makes it seem. If all this is chronological, oh, Lane's so cute when she does that, bro. Like, all right, I wanted to see this was number 14, right? So yeah, here's this that makes it seem like it's all just, chronological, right? If it is, then maybe those Toka diaries are still again, still chronological there. So even if they're titled whatever, right? Again, this is after the what would you call schizophrenia.
精神病というレッテルを貼られることは、社会的に隔離されるというステレオタイプの一般的概念、ライアン 以前に、精神病の一般社会の問題点を改めて考えさせられる。今回のセッションは、クライアントの病気であることに対する不安を取り除くための説明に終始。その結果、クライアント
Still need that motherfucking cerebral spinal fluid though. But again, the big thing being, yeah, so this is kind of, I guess, the more this is more her extending beyond, their lab or, their what would you call it? Their, I guess, what's the term? Their treatment center beyond, okay, like how is this like affecting her like at home or whatnot, right? Or, how is this affecting like how is the greater, I guess, world, playing a role, right? But yeah, again, so I don't know why these are like a few behind, but oh well. It's just something where it's like, yeah, we'll catch up. I'll do like it actually works out because again, we can read those. I can kind of do my own analysis, and then we'll see, what theirs is, right? So yeah, I just find it, yeah, very very interesting there. But the bigger thing there, and what I want to kind of let me save here, because if those are all just chronologically based, then it's quite possible, the Toka diaries are chronological too. So I find that very, very interesting because the first Lain diary should be the first Lain diary, I believe, is to the left here. But if these are all just again chronological, right? So this is what Lain diary number 1. So again, we actually haven't seen Lain diary number 1 because we saw what 3 to 5. Oh, and this is again Toka giving Lain her diary, right? So
起きて学校に行って授業を受けて、放課後に東子先生のところに話して帰ってきて、日記をつけることで私のためにいいって言う。誰に言うわけでもないし、何を書いたらいいのかわからない。とりあえず、ご飯を食べて、テレビを見て。
that's odd. Doesn't she hate baths? Wait a second. Yeah, doesn't she not like baths? We know this. So that's a little maybe what would you call it? Maybe that's alternate Lain, I don't know. I guess a big thing we should notice is, and again, I'm sorry, I was speaking during the entire thing. Again, because remember, Lain specifically said she hates baths. So I feel like and now she revealed and talked about how she feels as though there's another Lain, right? A doppelganger. She opened up to Toko about that. So maybe again, we should keep careful eye and watch over Lain's mannerisms in these diary entries, right? Because it's something to where, but again, here's where I was gonna go to, right? If these are all in chronological order, maybe the Toka entries, into her own diary are also in chronological order, even if the numbers are off, right? I feel like that's 28, 27. So I feel like, yeah, the big thing there is, so we saw 26. Because I think we just go through all these Toka ones, right? To catch up, and then I'll probably end it after that. So this is what 24. So yeah, here's what I'm gonna do. I'll save one more time. It's a bit excessive, but we'll go through those Toka diaries and then end it because this kind of makes it seem as though it's all chronological now. So yeah, so let's read these Toka entries, right? So oh my god, yeah, this is at the very beginning, so that's how we know. So yeah, very first client. So show us how he experienced.
なぜ私の研究対象年齢以下の12歳のクライアントを担当させるのか不満に思ったが、レインちゃんの顔を見たら、そう言えなかった。レインちゃんはとても可愛かったの？何か不思議な感じがした。とにかく、研究の対象年齢以下だろうが何だろうが、彼女は私のクライアント。幻視、幻聴症状が起こって、精神的に不安定らしい。家庭環境とかは悪いのね。幼児期の経験が屈折してイメージを作ってるかもしれない。なんとか私のカウンセリングで良くなってもらいたいな。 少しずつ心を開いてもらえるように。
Again, couple big things from this. One, this is literally her first client. I can't imagine a worse first client than Lain. Holy shit, you know, I hate to say it, but it's like, yeah, this is a pretty tough cookie to crack. And then so besides that, right? Again, she mentions Professor whatever, which is probably her boss and who we can assume she writes the reports to. So that I guess we have somewhat of an idea of where those reports are actually going. And then along with that, it's something to where it's like, I think the big thing is her saying how she, again, I guess even admitting then, you know, well, she said Lane's cute, right? But also just kind of resonating with her, right? Again, a big thing we talk about how she feels kind of like an older sister later on. But again, something to where she feels like kind of a connection to her, right? But again, something to where she again also mentioning she mentions the audio visual tour, you know, the hallucinations, right? You know, the psychological, you know, damage or whatnot, but also the fact that she's your client and the again, seemingly the big trouble keeping a professional relationship, right? And again, we know how quickly she was kind of to just go out of her way to almost, you know, become her therapist, right? You know, so find that very interesting there. So 25. Holy shit, there are a lot of Toka entries. Oh my god, I couldn't care less about this shit. She gets dumped anyway. Oh, dude, but I mean it makes sense, it's her diary, so. Hey, a little sus, a little sus. So again, right? Big thing being again, at first I thought it was the same name, but no, the professor is very different from this Takeshi, right? You know, it's Professor like Takahashi or something. This is like Takeshi, but big thing being we can assume that, you know, well, I don't want to say she's dipping on the therapy sessions for this dude, right? But you know, at any point we can assume that this is probably what's consuming, I don't want to say consume, but occupying her mind, you know, outside of therapy. I couldn't really be invested in this, but it's also interesting, I guess. I should have just read them all in order because now I don't know what's going to happen. Like in maybe some of her diary entries are going to be about Lane, some will be about Takeshi, but again, who knows? It's something where it's like kind of the big thing is, and we'll kind of acknowledge is how this plays a role into her work, right? You know, because obviously your work and home life, people like to say it's separate, but it inevitably, you know, ends up impacting each other, right? So that's something you can't really, you know, stop. So what is this? Well, we already saw 26. So hey, the fuck are you doing? Hey, we gotta watch what we fucking put on YouTube. We know they we already know where this ends. But again, so very clearly what would you call it? She's feeling some sort of way towards a Takeshi. Which I don't here's the thing. What is interesting to me is we know she dips early on one of the therapy sessions one time. I don't want to say that's because of Takeshi, but you know, at least now I know it's literally just chronological. Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
彼女はとても落ち着き払っている。12歳なんてまだ子供だと思っていたけど、レインちゃんは大人びている。まあ、最近の子供はみんなませてるって言うし、実際親戚の子とかも大人びたところもあるし、昔と今は違うのかも。なんだか私おばさんみたいなこと言ってる。幻覚なんかに負けないで。レインちゃん。私がずっと直してみせる。
I don't know if it was just me, but I heard laughing in the background. Again, I think what's really interesting about how do I save? We're still gonna go through catch up on Toko's diaries, but I'm paranoid about my computer crashing. A big thing there is again, she can already, I don't want to say see through, but she's already a bit uneasy about Lain there, right? Recognizing that she's at the very least not your average, client, right? So there's a lot more there that kind of meets the eye. So again, just pointing that out. I find that very interesting. And that's just in the second diary, at least, that she thinks there's more Lain that meets the eye.
でも、たけしさんをやっと捕まえて一緒にランチしたもんね。だけど、なんだかその
Damn.
たけしさん、いつもと違ってた。いつになってそわそわした言って、時
The
間が
fuck?
余ってる
What is he doing, bro? Like,
なんですかユースって、そんなに忙しいのかな。逆に私のこと嫌いになったのかな。まさか、そんなことないよね。でも、はるみの結婚式にも一緒に行ってないの。せっかくはるみに自慢しようと思って。じゃあね、もしかして、たけしさん私が結婚願望強いのかと思って、警戒してるのかな。そういう話よくあるって聞くもんね。でも、ランチを食べる無理したかった。ま、仕事で忙しいなら仕方ないか。もう少し我慢しなきゃね、とか。わがままな女と思われるのも嫌だし。たけしさんに嫌われたら。
damn, Jesus. Don't tell me that's actually what fucking happens. You can't tell me. Two more, holy shit. So, again, this is what's very interesting. So, this tells a lot about, because obviously Takeshi's just some random character, right? What these tell us a lot about is Toko, right? She's very, very into him, right? Like, let's put it that way, like he probably occupies her ever waking thought. But again, also her being kind of, I don't want to say like she's almost kind of obsessive over him. Like, I feel like it's interesting because we're starting to see kind of her personality in these kind of, I guess, along with, the counseling and, diagnosis tapes, right? We can see and again, it kind of goes with the whole theory that, the people who are most mentally ill are the ones who work with the mentally ill, right? It's like, or like all psychiatrists, therapists are more likely to be like mentally, or they're the professions with the highest amount of mental illness, like are people who are mentally, working within them because it's a thing of like self awareness. They're just more in tune, or I guess like in touch with that side of themselves, and then them just knowing more about it. Because again, it seems like with this, it's like she has some level of like I don't want to go as far as say possessiveness, but like obsessiveness over this dude, and it seems like again he means a pretty big deal to her. So, again, the big thing being like, I mean, what like three of like five logs were about him. So, but again, it's just something where it's like that's very very interesting there. So, and then her kind of immediately being worried, or I guess this is the anxious or worry side, right? That him kind of not being able to go, right, is like a big deal. So yeah, so let's go with 30 here. Shoot, I might not be able to catch up. I was hoping I'd be able to catch up.
心配になってる。さすがに三日坊主にはなってないけど、ちゃんとつけてないと気にならないよね。今週から、高島教授が出張だ。
yeah, Takashima, right?
だったな。 にも買い物行きたいしな。そうだ。はるみへのプレゼントも買わなきゃいけない。
And this is where she buys the thing for Lain, right? So but here's the thing, we already knew that she planned on not seeing him for 2 weeks, so that he was busy for 2 weeks. So seemingly, he's not gonna be able to do that, but I guess we'll see what ends up happening, right? So again, this is very interesting because it's also interesting because we noticed I looked at the number and we noticed that it cuts off at some point. She stops writing in her diary, so it's like, which again, Takeshi wasn't there, so holy crap, is this a long one?
でも幸せそうでよかった。私もウェディングドレスに憧れてる派だから。教会での結婚式はロマンチックに思えたし、披露宴も招待客だけで軽く100人以上はいたよね。こんな盛大な披露宴に出たの初めて。私はいつになったら春音みたいに幸せになれるんだろう。それにしても、披露宴にはお互いの友人関係がたくさん来てたけど、全然話をする人がいなくて、ちょっと辛かったな。たけしさん来られなかったし、かなこも結局ドタキャンだったし。社会人にでもなればいろいろと都合があるんだろうけど、友人の結婚式くらい優先すればいいの。って、私が文句言う必要はないけど、自分の結婚式はやっぱり、みんなに祝福してもらいたいな。
Yeah, and here, okay. I'm just gonna throw us out here, right? Big red flag, I hate to say it, but it's like a girl wanting, a woman, chick, whatever. Like, a girl wanting to get married, that in and of itself is not a red flag. Like, in fact, that's a green flag. It's like, because it shows that, they're committed, right? For the long term. But if they're like, well, obviously this is her diary, but right, but her being like this insistent is like, and saying it is like, if it's going to happen, it's like, okay, is there like a communication barrier? But again, I just find that very interesting. Her again, kind of being jealous, but also kind of rebounding it into like, oh, this is how it's going to go down for us when we know. Funny enough, just because we just happened to see one of the later diary entries, right? We know that that's literally not the case there. So, oh, looks like, yeah, we can see some of the psychiatry up above. So it's we're coming in and damn, who's this?
久しぶりに会った彼女は全然変わってない。出版社で働いてるだけあって、キャリアウーマン風で、少しだけ昔に比べると落ち着いて見えたな。ってことにしといてやろう。逆に、かなこが言うには、私は随分と変わったらしい。昔は少し近寄りがたいイメージがあったらしいけど、今は柔らかいイメージになったって。ほんとか？昔からそんな目で私を見てたのね。うるさん、花っぺめ。
Again, interesting thing about this is, again, we're getting more insight into Toka's past, right? And kind of how she was probably going through, education before she was working, right? So I wouldn't say going as far back as like when she's Lane's age, but again, what would you call it? Going back through, when Toka was growing up. So kind of seeing her past, like, and potentially seeing that influence kind of what she's doing now. So I just, again, find that very interesting. So again, and I find the biggest interesting part is we know her diary entries cut off at some point. So I already knew that.
かなこはまだまだ結婚するつもりはないって言ってたけど、はるみみたいに突然、私結婚するのなんて言わないでね。かなこまで結婚しちゃったらどうしよう。寂しすぎる。
Again,
どうしてるのかな
again, her wondering about A, Takeshi, but then B also again showing that, Harumi, right, was kind of I guess what would you call it? Oh shit, I did not mean to. Again, that kind of being a last what would you call it? Kind of a surprise thing from her, I think is interesting. So
嫌になっちゃう。高橋教授は本当に嫌なやつ。
damn.
他にも研究員がいるのに。最近、私妙にイライラしてる。たけしさんに会えないから、カウンセリングに進展がないから、雑用ばかり押し付けられるから。理由は全部だわ。何もかもうまくいかないことに苛立ちを覚えてる。私がイラついてしまったらダメだわ。カウンセラー失格よね。ごめんね、レイン。カウンセリング以外の仕事も私の仕事と思わないと。やることやって認めさせなきゃ私の負けだもの。そういえば、もうすぐハロウィンの時期だな。アメリカにいた頃はハロウィンの支度で毎日がお祭りみたいに楽しかったな。ああ、あの頃が懐かしい。今年はハロウィンもクリスマスもないかもね。
Again, I think an interesting thing is her specifically talking about this also makes it seem besides Takeshi being on her mind, right? Another kind of big thing is her career as well. Again, she seems to have some career aspirations, right? So that being something that kind of impacts what she does there too, right? And again, the kind of reality being that Lain can't be her single, like, oh, why is drunk at the top? But Lain can't be her sole and priority focus there. So
なんでこんな雑がしてたってくるの。もう労働基準法なんて関係ないじゃないの。ひょっとしていじめ。はい。よくある日本の件ね。やっぱり。なるほど。
this is interesting. This one's really interesting and probably the most telling out of all the diary entries because what it shows is that it seems as though Toka can't really handle her work. Like, I hate to say right, but not even her work, more so she can't kind of handle everything going on. Like in that, it's something to where again, like I said, the kind of inevitable or unfortunate reality is what happens outside of work impacts your work. It seems as though her kind of having issues being able to handle everything will, my guess, creep into kind of again her own work. So okay, again, that kind of being the interesting thing there. So was there a 35? Or I think we already had her diary entry 35, right? So but yeah, I guess what we'll do is we'll go through these two entries and then end it. I just wanted to catch up on now knowing that this is all just chronological, right? Yeah, I think this is very because we already well, that's later on, I think. Oh, it's one about Lane. This is actually interesting.
時々幻覚らしいものは見るにあまり知ってもない。幻覚を見たりするのは本人にとっても辛いことなんだろうと思うけど、決して暗い生活の子ではないはずなのに、学校で嫌な目に遭ってるのかしら。でも、母親が言うには、学校でのいじめはないって聞いてるし、レインは学校の話題を出すと口数が減ってしまうし、今度、レインの学校の友達に様子を聞いた方がいいかもしれない。私の小さい頃のいじめと今のいじめはかなり違うらしいし。 なんとかしてあげたいのよ、レイン。でも、レインのカウンセリングした日って、なぜか気分が暗くなる。私が暗くなっても仕方がないんだけど、そんな時に限って、高志教授につまらないことで文句は言われるし。明日はお休みだし、気分転換で知恵出よ
Oh, that's a risky business. Only one day off? That's 2 day okay, 2 days off I understand going out, but one day off, that's a little risky. But again, big thing there being again, I think this was a really interesting one. So I feel like particularly her coming off of kind of her, I guess, drunken, diary notes. I guess her kind of solution to dealing with that was kind of to involve herself more with Lane, but as her client, right? But then it also seems kind of like a double-edged sword to where it's like, okay, she's kind of the one who Lane is the kind of client that I guess she can't, just magically fix, right? Or so well, again, her first client, but again, like she said, she feels depressed when she sees Lane, but it's something to where it's like again, so she wants to help more, but there's certain stuff she can't do. Like again, our stinking suspicion is that like she's still hung up on the hallucinations, but it seems like in terms of like an actual diagnosis or of what she may potentially be calling him, there's still nothing there yet. But I guess we'll see about how this going out session goes, right? That's a little sus, one day off and you go to town. It's like, that's a little bit risky, but you know, cool birthday life.
う。たけしさんの様子がおかしい。
Again, gained a bit.
電話をしても、いつも忙しいっていうばかりで相手にしてくれない。仕事で忙しいのはわかるけど、そんなに冷たくしなくてもいいの。それに、私の誕生日までキャンセルするのはどういうことよ。仕事の方が大事なのなんていうセリフ、一番嫌ってたけど、今となっては私もつい言いたくなってしまう。もう私、27歳だよ、たけしさん。試験に受かった時は一緒に喜んでくれたのに、最近は研究所でも顔を合わせなくなったかな。少し気のせいだといいんだけど、初詣も育児も承知だった。なんだかこの先暗いよね。ああ、なんだか最近ついてないな。もう寝よう。考えれば考えるけど。
Okay. I think this is a very interesting one and a good one to leave off on because I think this says a lot. First things first, again, is this is when it seems like her, I guess, relationship with Takeshi starts to break down. At about because I think 39 is when he like I don't remember. We saw one that was it made it seem not well in the future, but again, not only is he still on her mind, but again, also this seems to be a start breakdown of their relationship. The other thing being that they've been together for not only is Takeshi also involved with like academics in some sort, or he's like he works within academia or has a career in a prominent academic field, but it's also something where they knew each other for quite some time. Her specifically mentioned he was there when she passed the exam, right? Presumably to get her current position, and then also being something where he's kind of involved in his work. So I don't want to say it's something where he's just cheating on her, right? It's quite possible he is just, kind of not as interested as he once was. And that is he's more involved in his work, kind of, I guess, similar to how Toko may have kind of involved herself more with Lain as a client, maybe, Takeshi's involved himself more with his work. And again, a big thing and that's interesting here is again, Toko mentioning she's what 27. Kind of the practical reality of that being, kind of prime time, optimal age to have kids, right? And obviously, before that, get married. That's the better order to deal in, right? Education, marriage, kids, right? It's typically the order you want to do it in while actually working a job somewhere in there. But you know, again, but obviously we know because we know she's been hung up on marriage. But it's like it's seemingly like that's not going to happen. But that's the big and interesting thing in there, and especially since we know her diary entries cut off at some point versus Lane's where they go up to like 150, right? again, so diagnosis claim 15. I think it's on the other side. So were we at 15? I think we were at 15. So I'm gonna end it here again. I'm just yeah. So now again, we got that confirmation that this is all just chronological, right? So we're just gonna go bottom up at this point. We're not gonna worry about numbers. We're not gonna worry about anything. We're just going chronological. But with that, I don't really have anything else to say on this one. So yep, that's it for this one. See you in the next one.